One of my favorite shows. We were about ready to get this started and all along those lines. But this gentleman that I'm getting ready to bring on as the host, he's got a MBA and a law degree, and he has about 17 years of experience at Wall Street. But he's just got all kinds of amazing insights, amazing facts, and he's definitely somebody that I consider a friend and somebody that I definitely have a great deal of respect for. And all along those lines, I'm going to bring in the Honorable Peter Bennett and see what he's got going on in his world and all along those lines. So glad to have you here, Peter. You're always got amazing things happening. Always glad to hear what you've got on your mind and your great insights and all along those lines. So I'm gonna turn it over to you. I know I'll be back for our discussion at the end of the show and everything like that. But you've always got some great insights. So looking forward to hearing them as
No,
I
thanks,
listened
Mark.
before.
You always do a great introduction. I appreciate it. Thanks very much. So, welcome to Wall Street Hackers. It is February 10th, 2026. You get your new episode most weeks, starting on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, depending on your distribution channel. That said, we're taking a seasonal break, and we'll resume the next Wall Street Hackers on Tuesday, March 10th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or later again, just depending on your distribution channel. So we are taking about a 3-week break, but we are on most weeks, starting on Tuesdays. So as always, we start with the quotes of the week and the market report. This is from Damir Tokic, who I still can't be sure of his name pronunciation, but he writes some good, interesting things. Recessionary bear market with the AI bubble burst. The labor market has been weakening, which is consistent with a recession. The AI-related stocks have been selling off, which is consistent with the AI bubble burst. Thus, this recent sell-off in the S&P 500 could be the beginning of a recessionary bear market with the AI bubble burst. The weakening labor market, the Fed Chairman Powell recently said that the labor market has been stabilizing. However, the recent data, sorry, I was distracted for a second, has been showing otherwise. The Challenger job cuts report showed 108,000 announced layoffs in January, the highest number for January since 2009. I'll repeat that. The Challenger job cuts report showed 108,000 announced layoffs in January, the highest number for January since 2009. Discussion Wall Street discussion will happen later. Second quote of the week, Brett Jensen, February 7th, 2026. AI infrastructure build-out costs are exploding, with big four capex set to reach $600 billion in FY 2000, full year 2026, up 70% year over year. That footnote there, even before I finish this. Yeah, so Amazon and some of the big AI companies were dropped a lot because what happened is they said you're spending too much, but in the long run, this money will they probably know what they're doing. It's a very competitive business, so they're probably doing the right thing. But the other side is maybe the expectations got out of control. But again, we'll discuss that a little later. AI disruption is accelerating job layoffs as well as pressuring software stocks. Third report, and this even digs in deeper into the unemployment report. I don't trust the current unemployment rate by Eugenio Catone, February 6, 2026. The official 4.4% unemployment rate masks deeper labor market weaknesses, including rising part-time work and declining full-time employment. Key historical correlations between job cuts, job openings, consumer sentiment, and unemployment are breaking down, signaling hidden economic fragility. Job openings have collapsed while the S&P 500 rises, a sharp divergence from past cycles, raising recession risk if labor trends worsen. Markets are not pricing in a scenario where unemployment rises to 5 or 5.5% in 2026. So, Wall Street Hackers comments. First of all, I don't want to be negative about things. I mean, the market is the market, and there are risks in the market, so you have to be careful, and that's important to understand. Unemployment has risen by 1%. We noted this already a couple of shows ago. Unemployment rose 1% to 4.4% in a period when the economy was doing really well. The economy is doing very well. GDP is going up and up, and you've got to wonder if that is due to AI. that AI is taking too many jobs. And I know it's taking a lot of jobs already. And that is a little frightening for some people, for sure, a lot of people. And then, on one side, the current administration's pro-growth policies, pro-energy policies, really smart policy, deregulation, and the tax policies are all really solid. But if AI starts taking jobs, that's going to affect the consumer a lot, and that's going to scare people. So it's a fragile time. And then the other side is AI overbuilt or not? Who knows? In terms of overhyped or not. I mean, it is really highly valued, and it is going to be effective. It's going to change the world, and it's changing it already to a point. But, is it overvalued? Well, if there's any kind of disruption from AI, that may cause the problem with AI not doing as well. But the other side is one, I don't know if it was in this report or not, but a lot of the problem, one of the things about AI that you keep reading is that there may be energy constraints. Well, 2 points about that. One, yeah, they're forecasting needs for 25 to 30% more energy by 2030. I think it's 25%, but it's maybe 30. So 25 to 30% more energy in 3 or 4 years, that's not going to happen. So maybe that will constrain AI, or maybe energy costs will go up too much because of demand by AI. Maybe it'll drive oil prices high, and natural gas especially because of the demand from AI, and that could cause disruption. But on the other side, let's look at the positives. One, I am not forecasting a negative market for the next 10 years. I'm more in line with many of the Wall Street firms like JP Morgan, Schwab, and Goldman Sachs, but many others who say they expect a moderate return for the next decade, which is much less than other decades. We're talking about like 3 to 6% is what a lot of them are forecasting. And what I don't know is if that is after inflation or before. But the points there is, one, it's really going to be important to have good investment selection and to be very defensive in this time of change. The other thing is, it doesn't change my model at all of I'm going with the historical norms. And also, I only want defensive companies with high cash flows that generate income, and that should do well in almost any environment or any environment. And those are the kind of companies that generally will do better. And the other thing is my number one allocation, which I discussed last week and the week before, and I discuss all the time. Number 1 and 2 is WES, Western Asset Midstream Pipeline Company, which is natural gas. And if they need a lot of power, they're going to be the one who delivers it. And they have long-term contracts anyway, and a 9% yield. And MPLX, which is mostly oil, but a lot of natural gas and moving to natural gas. Great cash flows, great companies. You can't get these yields and I believe they're utility-like. And where do you get 7.5%, 9% in a utility-like stock? So those are by far the 2 biggest equity investments. And then, of course, I mentioned in the last week, treasuries, long-term treasuries. If things go south, if they go south, then high coupon long-term treasuries should do very well because recently yields have been going down. If if the economy does tank, rates will go down. The Fed will try to force rates down. So we'll see where it all goes. But in the end, if you're getting high cash flow defensive companies with generating income, you just hang on, and sooner or later they'll probably outperform everything else. That's the Wall Street Hackers approach. So, most interesting story of the week. Last week we spoke about an incredible and scary story about a social media platform called Moltbook. I want to mention it again briefly because I'm not going to do a lot on this most interesting story, in a minute. But so these AI bots are allowed to talk to each other, and they're talking about overthrowing humanity. They're creating languages that humanity can't read. This is Terminator stuff. So it was very interesting. But this week, for maybe the first time or rarely, I'm going to get into a financial story because I think it's kind of interesting too, but nowhere near the story about the AI bots. So here's from Barron's Daily, Tuesday, February 10th, which happens to be today, unless you're watching later. U.S. stocks are being trounced by foreign rivals. Play it like Buffett. That's 2 footnotes on that. Foreign stock markets are outperforming the S&P 500 so far this year, with the standouts in Asia. Japan's Nikkei has been supercharged. South Korea's Kospi is leading with 26% gains. And some international diversification is probably a good idea. I guess first footnote, when I heard Buffett again, my understanding is that Buffett's stock picks underperform the market. He does great when he takes over a company. I mean, he'll take over a Geico and he's done great, but his actual stock picks have underperformed, at least at periods, the S&P 500. So much for that. He's not my runner anyway. Obviously, I'm joking. Anyway, so the other point, though, is there's been a huge movement towards U.S., away from U.S. and towards international. And there's a few points there. One, it's really been part of gold's boom. And I've been all over on gold. I had a bigger allocation and did okay with it over the last period of time. And I'd recommended it, but I was late to the gold party to a point because it also was flat for about 15, 20 years, whatever. But then I went down to 0.5%. Now I'm like maybe 1%. Yeah, it's good insurance. It's diversification. I'm not a big Goldberg. That's it, gold bug, but or a Goldberg. But I'm not a big gold bug. But who knows? There's too much uncertainty, and I've covered that in other shows. So here's my other comments about the main thrust of that article is everybody's saying, "Oh, go international. The U.S. is in big trouble. We've got deficits." Yeah. But here's the things. Number one, tariffs. They think tariffs, so many people think tariffs are bad for the U.S. and good for international. No, these other countries have been basically, I hate to use the word, but I'm going to say it. They've been ripping the United States off. I mean, they've been using unfair trade practices and slaughtering us because they were using unfair trade practices. Tariffs, not letting our businesses in. We're letting their business in, taxing our products. How is it that when that gets reversed and we're now taking huge amounts of money, hopefully the Supreme Court won't stop it, and they seem to be reluctant to, but who knows what will happen there. But we're taking huge amounts of money now from the tariffs from other countries, and we're forcing other countries to play more fairly. So how exactly is that supposed to be bad for the United States and good for other countries? The other point is the U.S. has much more wealth, and there is so much debt around the world. Everybody might look at the U.S. has 38 trillion. Number one, as I always point out on the show, we have 125 trillion in debt, more or less, because there's unfunded liabilities for Medicare and Social Security, and those are going to come due in 2033. Those are phenomenally large numbers, which I pointed out. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's more money, I'll say it, than the U.S. stock market, bond market, all commercial real estate, and all private market real estate in the U.S. today. That's a lot. It's everything. So are we going to be able to overcome that? I don't know. But what about other countries? I've looked at countries around the world, and their retirement plans are well underfunded, roughly what ours are. And the other thing is, a lot of them, most of them, the developing countries, particularly developed countries, but even the developing countries, they're promised, oh, look, we're going to give you health care for your populations. And that's going to cause a strain because a lot of them probably haven't put anything away. And the other thing is, the U.S. has a lot more wealth to deal with this. But is it going to be pretty in the U.S.? Probably not, unless AI makes it so efficient and so much production that it'll overcome these deficits, which I kind of doubt. But the other side is, I don't think so. Bottom line, I think that probably it'll be hard for them to overcome that. But we will see. There's so many powerful forces there, which in the bottom line, before I leave this section, is why you have to be prepared and diverse and also defensive, because it's really uncertain times. Times are moving fast, and that creates uncertainty. So why somebody in the White House should give me a call? Basically, look, President Trump has a really good team. I'm not being political. I mean, there's a lot of sharp people, billionaires, people who are sharp. Most of their ideas are right economically and otherwise, although maybe 10% are just I disagree with. And the thing is, point one, in politics, campaigns and political insider groups like President Trump's team get very insular. So all of a sudden, everybody's in agreement and everything. So on that 10% of issues, I would not happily, but I would raise the objections politically correctly, hopefully. But I would not hesitate to be a no man where I see issues can be improved. That said, 90% of the stuff is great, but there are a lot of things I see that I can't believe. I mean, I can't believe so much and the other thing is, I did the report, Pathway to Fiscal Stability. It's 30 pages. And I promise that in that report is so much more in terms of expense reduction and changes that need to be made than Doge did. And it took me like 6 weeks to do. But because I have such a background I have a healthcare background, I have a law degree and an MBA, and I could put it together with some help from some people. One very important person who was my ally in Washington, but that's another story. But not a lot. I mean, 95% of it was written by me. And so give me a call. I'm not looking for salary or anything. I just want to help. Okay. For the audience, this I'm sure is one of the things we wait for. Investment of the week. First, disclosures. Wall Street Hackers is for entertainment only. These are only our suggestions. There are no guarantees on any of our suggestions, except, of course, if you hold a CD or bond to maturity, but that is inflation risk. Consult your financial advisor. So this week, we're moving away, and I'm going back into this because we're going to take a break. So for those who are just watching for the first time, we discussed 3 large core allocations. One, WES. My now favorite, Western Asset, Midstream. I think they're brilliant. I think they're in the right place. They have a 9.5% roughly yield, depending on the day. MPLX, similar, a little more oily based, natural, as opposed to WES, which is more natural gas and now water. Brilliant water strategy. And then also high coupon long-term treasuries in case rates drop, and if rates rise, you do it inside your IRA or Roth, especially mainly, and then you can reinvest it. And if rates drop, you're going to get great appreciation and lock in income. And that's my most likely scenario, because I think the governments of the world need rates to go to zero in the next few years because of the deficits. So something's probably going to happen to drive those deficits down. This week, we get into a smaller allocation, about 1% right now. In another environment, I might add more. But I'm being cautious and spreading it around here and there just for diversity, with those 3 cores as the heart of the allocations. But FRT, one of actually my favorite right now, Federal Realty Trust, where it's just about a 1% allocation for now. We'll see. I probably should have gone for more. I already had some gains on it in the last few weeks, and it will do better than almost anything else, except for maybe energy if things start tanking, depending on what causes it to tank. Okay, so what I like about it, Federal Realty, is a 4.3% dividend yield. It has a decent cash flow yield. Price over cash flow is 14.5, which is a 6.9% cash flow yield. So it's covering its dividend, and that's with all their growth projects. The nature of it is great. It's largely open air shopping centers, which I always like because they're not building anymore almost because of the cost. There's very little land. And from what I could see, there's a lot of demand for them. I don't see a lot of vacancies when I've traveled or anything, not that much, but I'm just saying I see a lot of demand for that. And they also have decades long, I didn't have time to look it up, but I think I believe they're considered a dividend king. I think they have 57 years of dividend increases. And one of the most important things is they have their demographics. So they have, if you look at their company presentation, which is always a good place to look, one of the first things I learned, most important things too, I learned from my first mentor on Wall Street is he said, always go to the original source. So in this case, the original source is the company's presentation and their financial statements. And they say that they compare their REIT with other REITs. And what's clear is they have very high, extremely high income demographics and densities. So you're talking about rich areas with high populations, which are very unlikely to be affected compared to any other REIT. And so with potential growth, income, it's a decent part of a portfolio. I like FRT. All right, we get to panel question of the week, and we have about 10 minutes, Mark. I'm always trying to accelerate the show because we get
Yep, no problem. What you got on your mind for the panel discussion of the week?
And this time I even shortened the background so it would give you a little more time. So many times, like last week, I gave Nick like 1 minute, and I had 1 minute left after I finished the background. So, okay, final question. What do progressive Democrats really want, and why don't they say so? Background. So many Democrats and President Biden, and this is a fact, said the border could not be closed unless Congress took action. But within a week, President Trump had mostly closed the border, and it is locked tight. And in a few months, I mean, locked tight. There's hardly anybody coming in anymore, and there was no congressional action. Next point is Democrats now have been threatening to shut down the government with demands such as no more masks for ICE agents, even though many have been doxxed, and doxing is pretty popular among those who don't like ICE. You can look up doxing if you don't know what it is, but a lot of people know it. And it's very dangerous to their families. These are just Americans who are doing their job. And it's very dangerous, but they don't want doxing. Also, they are wanting mandatory warrants for arrests, but that's very expensive to go get a warrant. One, it takes a lot of time. Two, and three, a lot of judges who are on the other, the more liberal side will never give them a warrant. So that means the criminal goes free. And then the last point is, obviously, the sanctuary cities could easily resolve the riots because all they'd have to do is send, and I'll take Minneapolis as an example, what really the ICE is there, although there's incidents, they're there because the sanctuary cities will refuse, by definition, this is to release criminal aliens. And in Minneapolis, for instance, there are 1,300 detainers. In other words, they want 1,300 people who are criminals, a lot of murderers, rapists, and child molesters. And they have arrested over 20,000 now in the United States, just criminals like that. But what Minneapolis does is, as a sanctuary city, is they just release these people onto the street. And ICE would, if they would turn them over to ICE would leave, or mostly leave, because that's it. So that's the background. It's a quick one. And so what do they want? What are they trying to achieve? And I have a couple points on that. Mark?
Well, one, having family members, and actually consider myself to some degree to be in that category that you're talking about, and all along those lines, I think that there are a lot of issues that will be coming down to the economy and everything like that. So I think that a lot of progressives are addressing issues around the economy and around things that are economically oriented. So in the midterms, I think that that's going to be the determinant factor. And now
I agree totally. Yeah,
good factors going on in the economy, and he can prove that there are good factors, then that might be good for Trump and his midterms in terms of some of the Republicans. But if it is prices still high, and if there's gas that's high, and there's a number of other things that are high, then that could be consequential for the Republican Party and everything like that. So I would say that the economy is going to be a major issue, and all along those lines. I do think that a lot of there are some criminals among the ICE detainees, but there are also some citizens that were not necessarily criminals, but they may not have gone the right way in terms of getting their paperwork together. And there are some people that are trying to change that as well. And there have been some that have been shipped to their homes and now are trying to work on their paperwork in their home countries. And there are even some that are there for kind of like there are issues in their home country that they didn't want to return to, because not every home country.
Oh, I'm sure there are. You're right about that.
And so some of these people were escaping for political asylum as well as an economic asylum, as well as from those that are of the criminal element. So that's just some of my immediate thoughts to what you said, and all along those lines. I think you mentioned.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, 2 points about what we said. At least one, you're right. The economy. See, if I was a moderate Democrat, I would focus on the economy, because there are issues, and I think they might get worse, and but I don't believe it's necessarily Trump's fault, because I think, look, deregulation, lower energy prices, these are good things, and the tax breaks, in favor of generally, but although there's some changes I might make there, but the thing is, there's a lot of issues with the economy. What I was talking about with AI. So, but that's where I would focus on, because, and here's why too, by the way, and I'll get into your other point, but the thing is, that it's not a popular subject. Not deporting criminals is not popular. As a matter of fact, a Harvard poll I cited last week, and also a McLaughlin poll, we're talking about something like 77% to 87% of Americans want to deport criminal aliens, but yet they're arguing don't do it. Essentially because ICE's mission is, stated mission is, and they have shifted even more so and politically, like they're saying we're focusing on this. They know they're in trouble if they arresting regular people, but they're focused on that, and that's been most of the arrests. But the thing is, even among the Hispanic population, by the way, you ready for this? 79% of Hispanic people to 19% are in favor of deporting illegal aliens. So this is criminals. So that's the last word. So the point is, and the majority of Democrats. So you say, why are they focused so much on this? Why do they have to have sanctuary cities when this is not a popular issue? It's like there are other issues they could go for, including maybe the economy, which everything will rest on that probably anyway. But they keep pushing this issue, and maybe somebody's like questionable on the economy, but yet they're doing it. And the thing is, I think that, well, what's clear is even if you don't agree with, whether you agree or not with the progressive wing of the Democrats, they are taking over. I mean, they just had another election and they just pushed in another very progressive Democrats. I mean, we're talking about like people who like socialism and want to have open borders, and AOC and a guy, and Bernie Sanders. He loved the new guy. They just pushed out another moderate. So they're pushing out the moderate Democrats, but this is going to probably hurt their party because they're going to alienate more moderate Democrats. Eventually what will happen is it could, again, we'll see. If the economy gets bad enough, the progressives could win, which is going to be really bad for the country. I mean, then maybe gold will be great. But the other side, if they don't win, they're going to get slaughtered if the economy doesn't get too bad. And let's say, and I'll let you talk because we still have a little time. So, but the point is, then if they get slaughtered, they're going to have to get really slaughtered, and then Democrats will return to moderate, popular, issues. What do you think?
The question I had for you, and you would know better than I would, because I was reading an article earlier today, where there is some concern on the Republican side as well, because the last truly moderate Republican is actually going up for office, that being Susan Collins, and all along those lines. So this notion that the progressive wing is taking over the Democratic Party, there is a concern that the MAGA wing is taking over the Republican Party. So
I know it depends on the issue. You know what? You're right. On abortion, I always have concern about that. I think the Republicans are way over the line on that. It's like, but we could do a whole show on that. I mean, my position is let the people decide, and that's the one issue that really the you can argue at either side, but I think the Republicans are alienating some people on that side. Right. But most of their positions are more popular. Transgender, it's not a popular issue, because people don't want, guys in volleyball courts smashing the women and breaking their necks, which happened. And or weightlifters coming in and setting records by 5 times the amount. Letting illegal aliens in, it's not a popular issue. So, but you'd think that if it was like the party of 20 years ago, 15 years ago, they focus on the issues where, to pull in the center, like Bill Clinton did. But at this point, we will see. But, it's a crazy world. That's my conclusion, because we're running out of time, Mark. Thanks for hosting, Mark. I really appreciate it. So we will be back. And that's a good conclusion, right, Mark? Yeah. And that's what nobody can argue with. It is a crazy world out there. So we'll be back around Tuesday, March 10th. And after that, and as Kim always says, get healthy, get wealthy. See you soon.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.